Please be seated for the prayer.
Body, would you please stand for Her Worship the Mayor?
May we, the councillors of Ku-ring-gai, always be aware that decisions we make affect the daily lives of those we represent. May we make these decisions with knowledge and goodwill, respecting the views of others, and may we show ourselves worthy to follow in the footsteps of those who have protected the special qualities of Ku-ring-gai for over 100 years. Amen. On behalf of Council, I recognise the traditional custodians of the land and pay tribute to elders past and present. I would like to outline a few points regarding this evening's proceedings. Tonight's meeting will be live streamed on the Council website at www.krg.nsw.gov.au/livestream. Only councillors and council staff will be shown on camera. The webcast of the meeting is available on Council's website. The webcast will commence once the Mayor is seated and will cease if Council goes into a confidential session where the public and the press are excluded, pursuant to Section 10A of the Local Government Act. Council meetings remain open to the public as observers, but in line with the Code of Meeting Practice, speakers will now address the Council through the monthly public forums and not at Council meetings. For more information about addressing Council, please visit our website at www.krg.nsw.gov.au. All present tonight must refrain from engaging in disorderly conduct, publicly alleging breaches of the Council's Code of Conduct or making other potentially defamatory statements. Councillors and Council staff must declare and manage any conflicts of interest that they may have in relation to any item of business that is the subject of the meeting agenda this evening.
Madam Mayor, sorry, point of order.
Councillor Spencer, point of order.
If we could fix that.
Thank you. We'll just correct that. Don't want to confuse anybody. Councillors, are there any apologies? Looks like everybody is present. General Manager, are there any staff apologies?
There are none, Madam Mayor.
Councillors, are there any declarations of interest this evening? Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On item GB10, request for General Manager Delegation Piers 3 electricity transfer, I'd just like to disclose that I'm an employee for a company that generates and sells electricity, so I don't intend to participate on this particular matter. Thank you.
Thank you. No other declarations, General Manager. Are there any staff declarations?
There are, Madam Mayor, in relation to item C1, facilitation of the General Manager's performance review. Myself and directors are declaring a conflict and will not participate during that debate.
Thank you. General Manager, documents circulated to councillors, please.
Madam Mayor and councillors, just the late councillors, information behind the Greens. There are two memos. The first in relation to GB1, Marion Street Theatre for Young People, request for funding. That's just advising of a correction to a figure on page 41 of the business paper. And in relation to GB10, request for General Manager Delegation, Piers 3 electricity tender, a memo from the Director Strategy and Environment dated 10 May, amending the participation fee quoted in the Council report.
Thank you. General Manager, would you please list the items to be considered this evening in closed meeting?
Madam Mayor and councillors, there are a number. Item C1, which I articulated previously, facilitation of the General Manager's performance review, both the report and attachments A1 through A7. GB9, which is RFT 7 2021, supply and install suburban village signs, attachments A1 and A2. GB10, request for General Manager delegation, Piers 3 electricity tender, attachment 1, and GB13, Linfield Village Living Project update, attachment 1.
Councillors, I seek a motion that those materials remain confidential. Moved Councillor Spencer, seconded Councillor Greenfield. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Councillors, I now seek a motion for confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on the 27th of April 2021. Moved Councillor Smith, seconded Councillor Greenfield. All those in favour? That is unanimous. We move to minutes from the Mayor. MM1, Seth Morgan, retiring President of the 416 Group, and it is timely, this being Volunteers Week, where we seek to recognise and thank all the volunteers across Ku-ring-gai, that this mayoral minute seeks to provide a great example and recognition of just one such person and his long contribution. Seth Morgan, retiring President of the 416 Group. This mayoral minute is in recognition of a long-standing community member, Seth Morgan, on the occasion of his retirement as President of the 416 Group. The 416 Group was initially set up over 20 years ago with the aim of protecting West Linfield and West Killara against inappropriate development. Since that time, the group has widened its aims, becoming involved in a range of local issues such as setting up community fire units, which continue to this day. The 416 Group was also active in encouraging membership of local neighbourhood watch groups to assist the community in preventing crime. The following testimonial was presented at the March 416 Group meeting. Seth Morgan and his wife Jenny have been Ku-ring-gai residents since the early 1960s, with the couple being some of the first residents of Albert Drive, Killara. The Morgan children attended Beaumont Road Primary School. Seth had a successful career in aviation as an aeronautical engineer, but has always displayed a keen interest in the well-being of his local community. For a number of years, he was the Secretary of the West Linfield West Killara Progress Association, formed to help develop the community centre on the Moore Avenue shops and other facilities servicing the residents of Linfield and Killara west of Lady Game Drive. In the 1990s, the conservation values of the Lane Cove National Park and its residents were being affected by a range of issues, including the third runway at Sydney Airport, the construction of the M2 motorway, and the impacts of the 1994 bushfires. An informal group of residents called the Albert Drive and West Killara Residents Action Group was formed as a result. In 2001, Seth Morgan led the evolution of this group to the next stage with the creation of the 416 Group, its name being derived from the telephone code that was used in the area at that time. The powerful owl was chosen as the group's logo to signify watching over and preserving the environment. In his role as President, Seth Morgan has been responsible for convening meetings and engaging with residents, leading discussion of ideas and policies, writing and distributing the group's newsletter and other correspondence, and representing the group in meetings with councillors and local members of Parliament in Ku-ring-gai, Davidson and Ryde. During his tenure, Seth has maintained a good working relationship with the mayors and councillors of Ku-ring-gai. I have found him to be a clear thinker, courteous and hard-working, and able to represent the interests of residents in an effective manner. His quiet yet inspirational leadership has led to great respect for Seth Morgan within the local community. Seth Morgan has now lived in and made a sustained contribution to the local community for more than 50 years. Some of the projects he has led or contributed to include safety measures on Lady Game Drive, supporting residents by making formal submissions to council on inappropriate development applications, bushfire hazard reduction and increasing volunteer participation through community fire units, increasing community involvement in Neighbourhood Watch, initiating a memorandum of understanding between the City of Ryde and Ku-ring-gai Council for the City of Ryde Council to advise West Linfield, West Killara residents of any development proposals adjacent to Lane Cove National Park that might affect the environment or the residents. Increasing community input into the Ku-ring-gai housing strategy and the Linfield Village Hub, involving the community in future plans for the CSIRO in Bradfield Road, Linfield. Seth Morgan is an excellent role model for how community leaders can be effective forces for good and how important residents can be in working with council to protect the places they love. On behalf of the council, I thank him for all his efforts on behalf of the Ku-ring-gai community, and I am therefore providing this recommendation: A, that the mayoral minute be received and noted; B, that the Mayor write to Seth Morgan enclosing a copy of this mayoral minute, thanking him for all his efforts on behalf of the Ku-ring-gai community. Are there any other comments from councillors? Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to thank Seth Morgan for his service to our local community and also the other members of the 416 group for their contribution. I know that during the last 3.5 years I've valued their contribution on a number of topics that affect the West Linfield and West Killara area, and I really appreciate that we do have this group of residents who are actively engaged with council matters and also actively engaged with informing the local residents of what's been going on. I also do appreciate that the 416 group has a particular point of view on certain matters, one that is different to other local groups in the area, and it helps provide a bit of flavour or a bit of diversity to everything that is considered. So I'd like to thank CES and the 416 group in all that they've done for us in the local community.
And certainly when I joined council in 2006, one of the first invitations I received was from the 416 group to go down and meet the committee and the members. So I think it's wonderful that the group remains active and that CES has given so much of his time and energy to it for so many years. It's also reassuring that the baton has been handed over to a new president, and as recently as today, the group is engaging on some issues with development applications in Ryde Council area that have a potential to impact them locally. So if there are no further speakers, I will put that mayoral minute. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Councillors, we move to petitions. There is one in the business paper, PT1, Norman Griffith Oval Sports Ground Development. Is there a mover for that petition? Moved by Councillor Clark that the petition be received and referred to the appropriate officer for attention. Is that correct, Councillor Clark?
That is correct, Madam Mayor.
And is there a seconder for that? Seconded Councillor Greenfield. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Are there any other petitions? None. We move to general business, and I invite councillors to nominate any item on the agenda that they wish to have a site inspection. Councillor Spencer? No site? Not? Your light's on. You might.
I know.
I now invite councillors to nominate any item on the agenda that they wish to adopt in accordance with the officer's recommendation, allowing for minor changes without debate. Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will start with GB1 if I may, and hopefully we can have a short meeting tonight. So GB1, if I may move, there is no officer's recommendation. If I may move in accordance with the wording above, meaning councillors approve the request from the Marion Street Theatre for Young People for annual core funding of $50,000 plus annual project funding of $20,000, a total of $70,000 for 1 year.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Clark, I'm sorry, yes, Councillor Nye, you've got your light on.
Can we withdraw, please?
You can.
Withdrawn? Okay, we'll move on.
So if I may move GB2 as the officer's recommendation.
GB2, draft community
sorry,
engagement
GB2, yeah.
policy as per the recommendation, seconded by Councillor Greenfield. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB3, officer's recommendation.
Withdrawn, Madam Mayor.
Withdrawn, Councillor Chateau.
Carry on.
Yes, thank you, Councillor.
GB4, officer's recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Clark. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB5, officer's recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Smith. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB6, officer's recommendation.
That is seconded by Councillor Kay. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB7, officer's recommendation.
Minutes of the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee. That's seconded by Councillor Smith. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB8, officer's recommendation.
Domestic and Commercial Waste Collection Service, seconded by Councillor Kelly. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB9, officer's recommendation.
RFT 7-2021, supply and install suburb and village signs. Seconded,
I'm sorry.
seconded by Councillor Pettit. Did you want to add to this?
I'm sorry?
Were you wanting to?
No,
No.
I jumped the gun. I'm
All
sorry.
right, so we've got a seconded by Councillor Pettit. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
Point of order regarding GB10. Now, look, if we are not debating, then the staff don't have to leave. Is that correct?
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Someone called for a conflict.
Yep. The answer is correct if we.
So you don't have to leave.
Well, he does have to leave for us to resolve it, but.
Thank you. GB10, officer's recommendation. Let's assume he's not here.
Just wait a moment. Go ahead, Councillor Spencer. You're moving.
GB10, officer's recommendation.
Thank you. That is seconded by Councillor Chateau. All those in favour?
Should I mention the late memorandum as well?
You can mention as.
Including.
Yes, and that was seconded by. Sorry, who seconded that? Councillor Chateau. Thank you. All those in favour? That is unanimous. We'll just get Councillor Nye back.
So should I just go to NM3 and then leave the other two? Yeah.
Councillor Spencer.
Thank you. GB11, officer's recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Greenfield. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB12, officer's recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Chateau. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB13, officer's recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Clark. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
Madam Mayor, may I move NM3 as printed without debate?
NM3, is there a seconder? There is. Councillor Greenfield. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
Should I leave the other two NMs? Thank you.
Are there any other councillors who want to move without debate? Councillor Chateau.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move NM1, Clara Bowling Club and Clara Lawn Tennis Club. Without debate.
Yes, NM1, Clara Bowling Club and Clara Lawn Tennis Club.
Withdraw.
Withdrawn by Councillor Nye. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move an item in C1. I believe I can do it without going into confidential. I can describe it.
Yes. Yes.
Do the staff have to leave?
You are able, as you intend to do.
Can I withdraw that to go into confidential, please?
That is withdrawn by Councillor Kay. All right. What haven't we done? GB1? All right, councillors, we start with GB1, Marion Street Theatre for Young People, request for funding 2022 to 2024, and I seek a motion, please. Councillor Chateau, is your light on for this motion?
Could be. Madam Mayor, I could move the officer's... Well, sorry, let's just have a look at this. The officer's recommendation...
No, there
no,
isn't
we
one.
have to determine whether to provide funding. My motion is that we provide the funding for 3 years. To provide the annual core funding of 50,000 plus annual project funding of 20,000, total 70,000 each year for the next 3 years, 2022 to 2024 inclusive.
Thank you. We'll just get that up on the screen.
Should just be that council approves the request. Yep.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Clark is seconding that. Councillor Chateau, do you wish to speak to that motion?
I'll reserve my right at this stage. Thank you, Madam.
Councillor Clark has seconded. Do you wish to speak to that motion?
Just briefly, Madam Mayor, I suppose I'm more seconding this motion for the purpose of debate to get this motion rolling. I think that as the course of the debate proceeds, we'll round out the number that Council feels is appropriate to land on. But obviously Marion Street Theatre for Young People is an important organisation within the Ku-ring-gai LGA, and it's something that Council has been supporting to the tune of, 300 and something thousand dollars over the last, 7 years, 6 years, whatever it is. So I think it's important for Council to continue its commitments, but to what specific amount, I'm open to hear from the rest of the floor.
The next speaker is Councillor Spencer.
Madam Mayor,
Councillor Spencer.
now would it be proper order if I put in an amendment?
Yes, you may do so.
And that is to change the last sentence to 1 year.
Thank you. We'll just get that amendment up.
Just need a seconder.
Yes, indeed.
Otherwise, it will lapse.
Seconded by Councillor Kay.
Thank you.
Would you like to now speak to that? Because now that we have an amendment, we can't deal with the original motion. We have to deal only with
Well,
the...
I hope we don't have to deal with the original motion.
Well, not at the moment.
I think Marion Street Theatre for Young People is a good project. It services a particular area, a class of people in a particular area. I've said that. And I've said that over and over again. Now, we have 10 councillors, 2 from each ward, and sometimes we have to work together with councillors from different wards to achieve things that concern our individual or respective wards. So I have things that I need for the residents of my ward. It may not be relevant to someone from the Gordon ward. Now, for this reason, although the Marion Street Theatre for Young People is not very known to the residents of my ward. They have other issues that's more concerning to them. For instance, footpaths, roads, trees, and so on. And that is reflected from the number of issues that have been raised by me, representing my constituents, to the relevant directors. Now, that said, I think that I would support my fellow councillors in the Gordon ward to get this across the line, and I think it is fair for us to do so. Now, again, I did say in our last meeting that I was one of the propounders for the original motion in the previous funding. I think it was $40,000 for 3 years. So now look, I've read all the emails, not the spam mails from supporters of Marion Street Theatre for Young People. And I do have, a bit of a soft spot for them as well, young children and so on. I think 1 year is fair. 1 year is the least we could do, and then let the next council decide on their funding. And that would not tie up, our next, term council into something that they may not be comfortable with. Let them make that decision, whether they want to carry on funding or not. But at least we've done our part. In our term, we give them the funding that they want for 1 year. I'm not suggesting that we should give something less or more, but I think 1 year is prudent and 1 year is fair. You're supposed to clap. No one's clapping. Never mind.
They know they're not supposed to in a council
All
meeting.
right, so that is all I have to say, and I hope that my fellow councillors would agree with my reasoning and perhaps give them what they want, and then they come back again, put their argument and their case forward to the next council for the forward funding if they still need funding. I hope that they don't need funding anymore, and I've said in my correspondences that there are examples of other theatre groups that are private, and they have not requested for funding. And of course, we have the recommendations from the Risk and Audit Committee that suggests that community groups should have equal funding, equal opportunity, fair, but not uneven, unfair funding. Now, because we have done so, I've read the past voting patterns, and I can almost tell you that when Maliki was mayor, she voted against this. When you were mayor, Madam Mayor, you voted against it. You and Maliki have been consistently voting against funding this, but eventually we did because we wanted to help them. And I know that when Councillor Chateau was mayor, she voted for this. So I think this is fair. We do $70,000, as I believe the last few council terms have done the same. Come to a compromise, give them the money that they need, let them survive, and then let the next council decide where they want to go from there. Thank you.
Councillor Kay is seconder for the amendment. Do you wish to speak now?
Yes, so I concur with Councillor Cedric Spencer in relation to obviously the year of financial commitment. My concern would be that other groups would come forward expecting also a 3-year commitment, and this would set some sort of precedent. As Marion Street Theatre would be very aware, I've always been a supporter of them, and by no means is this deterring from anything otherwise, other than to it be reviewed yearly, which could be a sliding scale. At the end of the day, there could be an increase of funding in the following year. So definitely agree with Councillor Spencer in that reduction of a year and then reviewing it year by year, as we've been doing prior. Thank you.
Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to foreshadow this amendment with another amendment. Is that possible? Yes.
Yes.
I'd like to bring the wording on the screen of what I'd like to foreshadow. And then there's a fair bit to read. I don't know if you want me to read it out first and then seek a seconder, or whether...
You might as well read it out while the staff are getting
Okay,
it
sure.
up.
Okay, so I move that A, Council notes that there has been a history of Council supporting the Marin Street Theatre for Young People, MSTYP, by providing the organisation with a home. A recent example of this is the licence agreements between Ku-ring-gai Council and MSTYP to provide use of the Marin Street Theatre for a period of 12 months from July 2012 at a rate of $6,000 per annum. B, Council notes that when the Marin Street Theatre was closed in December 2013 as a result of significant non-compliance with building code standards, MSTYP lost access to its traditional home and had to find locations for its drama classes, theatre performances and office rental from other organisations at a higher cost. Recent examples of these costs are as follows. 2017, $46,000, 2018, $47,000, 2019, $53,000, and then 2020, $95,000. Point C, Council notes that it has provided financial assistance to MSTYP through Council resolution since 2015 as follows, and then you can read the table there, but I'd like to correct 2019. 2019 should say 40,000 and the total 342,000. Point D, in the absence of an operational Marin Street Theatre, Council will continue to provide financial assistance to MSTYP of $60,000 per annum for the next 3 years. The intention of this financial assistance is to help MSTYP with funding its operations outside its traditional home. If the rebuild of the Marin Street Theatre is completed prior to the end of this 3-year period, MSTYP will be able to return home, and this financial assistance will cease pro rata. Point E. During the 3-year period, Council staff should also engage MSTYP on a regular basis to identify potentially more cost-effective locations from which to operate. Do I have a seconder?
No, it's foreshadowed.
Oh, foreshadow, okay.
And I call for a seconder at the right time, but not now. It's just foreshadowed. So that's for the information of councillors, but in terms of our meeting procedure, we can only deal with the amendment that is on the floor at the moment, which is Councillor Spencer's amendment. There are other speakers on Councillor Spencer's amendment. Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is tricky. I'm going to speak against this motion, and this is based on a principle of mine. I was a member of the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee when we received the audit report on Council's use of funding and grants and things like that. A bit of history to this. There has been community concern in the past with regards to grants and how grants are allocated. Yes, councillors are in a position to offer financial assistance to organisations outside of the grants process, but there is a strong preference also where there is a grants process in place to allocate funding fairly to all of the organisations that have applied where it is applicable. In the case of Ku-ring-gai Council, we already do have an arts grant that does support a number of organisations in the arts, and so I'd imagine that if you were one of the other organisations in the arts space, looking at what's going on with MSTYP versus what's going on with your own separate organisation, you'd sort of think, why does one organisation in the arts have preferable treatment over others? So personally, I can't support a motion that allocates funding to external organisations without a strong rationale. I can't support a motion that allocates funding to an external organisation when we already have an existing grants process. However, if there is a strong rationale, a strong reason for doing so, for allocating extra funding, then I'm okay with it. So in this particular case, there isn't that strong reason. In my foreshadowed motion, which I'll talk about, later, there is, but for this particular case, I can't support 70,000 without a strong explanation as to why it is happening outside of the normal process. I think our residents here in Ku-ring-gai expect us to be able to explain why something has happened outside of process. And I'm okay with things happening outside of process as long as it's explained, but this particular motion, as well as the original motion for 70,000 for 3 years, I personally can't explain or defend to my residents as much as I'd like to support them. So this is just merely a matter of process. I can't support this wording in its current form, but I'm open to seeing what the majority of Ku-ring-gai councillors say. Thank you.
Are there other speakers on Councillor Spencer's amendment? Yes, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that in terms of how I'd like to fund Marriage with Theatre for Young People, I think it's important to take into account that this council's term is nearly over. And so I'd be concerned about locking us into longer term strategies. I think therefore Councillor Spencer's motion is putting forward, or only putting forward funding for the next year is appropriate. I know I'm actually the treasurer of my own club, which we rely heavily on grants from our university, which provides 50% of our income. And we have to get that money every single year. We have to put an application for that money every single year. So I understand completely why, yes, as an organisation, you would want the financial knowledge that you would have that money coming in year on year for 3 years. But I think it'd be more appropriate for the council to provide the money on a year-by-year basis. And if Marriage with Theatre for Young People desires further funding in the future, I would invite them to come and apply in the following financial years. So therefore I think Councillor Spencer's motion for 1 year is appropriate in this case. So I'm happy to support the motion as written.
The amendment, yes.
The amendment, Madam Mayor, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Shadow.
Madam Mayor, councillors, 50,000 a year for 3 years we seem to be in agreement about. And the background for that, as Councillor Nye has mentioned in his foreshadowed amendment, is that when Marion Street Theatre for Young People was in Marion Street, they made, for example, ticket sales, because of having a large theatre, of $200,605 a year. That was in 2013. After they were removed, for good reasons, because of the state of the theatre, and they had no central location, they only earned from ticket sales $89,675. So they dropped nearly 120,000 or 110,000. And the reason that we have been supporting them for 3 years for core funding at a time is to make up some of that shortfall. 50% of that shortfall is 50,000. The 20,000 per annum is what they've asked for 3 years to develop a new theatre project each year. Now, I'm sure all of you who've been in business know that you don't just plan for 1 year ahead. You plan for 2-3 years ahead. Planning takes time, energy, and man and woman power. And for this reason, I support what Councillor Spencer has said with regard to Marion Street, and I know he supports it. But I just think 20,000 a year gives them the ability to plan ahead for projects. Now, 50,000 a year is for core funding, and it's 20,000 a year is for special projects. It seems a bit sad that we seem to want to chisel off money from what our communities, organisations who do a fabulous job in the community ask for. 20,000 a year for 3 years, when you look at council's budget and the sort of and the money that we have doesn't seem to be a great deal. There's been talk, I know, of, and in fact Councillor Spencer alluded to the fact he sees Marion Street Theatre for Young People as a Gordon Ward thing. It's definitely not a Gordon Ward thing. Although now they have an office in Gordon, they actually perform in a number of areas. They perform at the Turramurra Library. They've been performing at St John's Church, which is Gordon, and the Gordon Library. They've been performing at St Martin's Church Hall, but also the Pymble Town Hall. And the people that work in Marion Street Theatre for Young People come from all over, although the majority, and I think we've had the information sent to us, the majority come from the local area. But it attracts tourists to the area, to our area, to Ku-ring-gai. So I just think it's a whole of Ku-ring-gai enterprise that we're looking at, and we're looking at and I guess all of you have read the budget statements. It's not a financially extravagant organisation. They look after their pennies very well, and for that reason I can't support the 50,000 plus the 20,000 just for 1 year. I think they deserve to be able to plan ahead. So I'll leave it at that.
I might just augment some of the comments that Councillor Spencer made, just to clarify. As I've outlined to Council before, my own family are keen supporters and thoroughly enjoy the arts offering across Sydney and beyond, and we have always, since we moved into Ku-ring-gai in 1987, enjoyed the arts on offer across Ku-ring-gai, and particularly as residents of Kalara, we were so close to the Marion Street Theatre that when raising 4 young children, it was often a date night for us to go to dinner and a show at the theatre. So it was a great loss when the theatre closed. My husband, as I've mentioned before, as a chartered accountant, gave his time and energy to the Belvoir Street Theatre Company in an honorary capacity on the board for many years to assist them to remain financially viable. This was a professional theatre company, yet still they struggled. And my husband's contribution to them was to help them stay afloat, to have them think about the programs that they could offer, the salaries that they could commit to, the planning that they could undertake, to cut their cloth according to what they could afford, and to encourage philanthropy of those who do support their enterprise. And this is something that needs to be done across the board, whether it's professional theatre companies or those in the arts field, as well as in the non-professional arts. So I just want to make it clear that I support the arts, and I support the necessity to financially contribute to the arts. But of course the arts across the board, in terms of Ku-ring-gai, is the focus of some of those comments that those who either attend or observe the Audit and Risk Committee meeting are aware as being raised as a concern going forward. And councillors will know that staff accordingly are working on a revised policy with this in mind. But that is not ready at this stage, so So I think there is some latitude, but bearing in mind Councillor Spencer's amendment has put that time of 1 year into his amendment, during which period of time the revised policy should be available to the next council, and that might help council assist in ensuring that its decisions going forward are ethical and equitable to all in the community. So I do intend to support Councillor Spencer's amendment. Are there any other speakers on this amendment? If not, I will put that amendment, which is Councillor Spencer's amendment. All those in favour? That is Councillors Clark, Spencer, Greenfield, Kelly, Kay, Anderson. Against? Councillors Nye, Pettit, Chateau, Smith. The amendment is carried and becomes the motion. I put Councillor Spencer's amendment as the motion. All those in... Sorry. Foreshadowed. Sorry. Foreshadowed, but we have only one there at the moment that was carried. Councillor Nye, you want to move your foreshadowed motion now?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I haven't done a foreshadow thing before, but I'd like to move the foreshadowed amendment as
an amendment. It's the only...
Just an amendment now.
It's an amendment.
Just as an amendment.
Is there a seconder for that foreshadowed? That is now an amendment. Thank you. Councillor Clark is seconding that. Councillor Nye, do you wish to speak to that now?
Oh, yes, Madam Mayor. So, I previously spoke on the other matter that we need a strong reason to support why we are providing money to an external organisation outside of our usual grants process. We currently do distribute up to $100,000 a year to other organisations, including those in the arts, and each of those organisations, they have to apply. They put in their proposal. They ask for a specific amount of money. They say what the money is for, and then at the end of the 12-month period, they also need to account for how they have spent the money that the council has given them, and it is going to be an ongoing concern especially in the future when council gives extra money to some organisations but not to other organisations. It's very hard to justify, and I've said that I'm only comfortable doing that if we provide a very strong rationale behind it. In the particular case of Marion Street Theatre for young people, I think the reason is that historically they've paid about $6,000 per year just to do their drama classes, their theatre, their office, all of that covered by $6,000 a year. And if you look at 2017, 2018, 2019, they've had to pay something in the 40s or 50,000s instead of 6,000. So as a result of Marion Street Theatre closing down, their running costs have already gone up quite significantly, and this is even before you look at the impact on ticket sales. In 2020, it was a bit of an outlier because the external rent and hire costs went up from about $53,000 to $95,000, and part of that's due to COVID, and part of that's also due to an expanded vision of where they would like Marion Street Theatre to be, and as part of that expanded vision, they would have to hire additional things at different locations, which they are completely in the right to do. Personally, I think, and I'm comfortable with the history that we as a council, not we as in during my council term, but we as in the many council terms before, have supported Marion Street Theatre for young people in providing them with a home. And in the absence of a home, we'd like to support them in hiring external locations. I do hope that perhaps within this 3-year period, or perhaps in the next 5-6 years, whenever, that there will be a new Marion Street Theatre rebuilt, and that the Marion Street Theatre for young people will then be able to use that new venue at a similar, maybe higher than $6,000 per annum, but at a rate that allows the arts to continue here in Ku-ring-gai. Not just Gordon Ward, but all across Ku-ring-gai and outside of that as well. But I think we need to tie our funding to the concept of providing them support to have an external home whilst the Marion Street Theatre itself lies in ruins. As for 60,000, why 60,000? Well, if you look at 2017 to 2019, I mean, their external rent-to-hire was 46,000, 47,000, 53,000. So even 60,000 more than covers their historical rent and hire. 95,000 last year was a bit of an outlier, so I can't really quite count that. But if you think about it, we're just aiming to help the organisation find an external home. You'd argue that perhaps 50,000 suffices for that purpose, and an extra 10,000 will go towards new projects, things like that. My personal view on the $20,000 project funding that was requested is that 20,000 project funding, that should be part of the grants program, just like everything else that all the other arts organisations have. All the other arts-related organisations, when they want specific project funding, they will apply for it. They'll request 20,000, they'll request 30,000, they'll request 5,000, whatever it is. We as a council and councillors will assess it and give them what we believe is appropriate. But I don't think it's appropriate to ask for that 20,000 within this particular thing. Instead, I'm just suggesting up to 60,000 per annum to help support them hire external locations. And if for whatever reason we completely refurbish and build the Marion Street Theatre up to standard within the next 3 years, then they can have their new home and we can cease funding pro rata. Thank you.
Councillor Clark as seconder of that. Do you wish to speak?
I'll reserve my right, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Shadow.
Madam Mayor, could I just see up on the screen the actual amendment, because all I can see up here is the preamble.
D&E, perhaps. Yep, that's it.
So just to clarify, so Councillor, now you're suggesting 60,000 a year for the next 3 years, and that's for core funding rather than for project funding. Is that
Yes.
correct? Yes. Might I just ask through you, Madam Mayor, the Director of Community, Director Bevan, about about project funding. Is the limit 5,000 for funding for community grants? Or?
Director.
Madam Mayor and councillors, there is a limit under the current guidelines. However, we are reviewing the guidelines and that may change, depends on what the recommendations are and what we get from community consultation. But currently, yes, you're correct, there is a limit.
It's only 5,000. Thank you.
Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Nye is a dear friend of mine, and I know he spent a lot of time writing this up. I just wish he hadn't put this up, and I wish he had not put this up to be recorded in the minutes, to be a historical fact. I'll tell you why. Because it is, again, he's a dear friend of mine, but his argument is flawed. I'll tell you why. Marion Street Theatre for young people did not have a home. He mentioned the word home many, many, many times, and that this council kicked them out of their traditional home. And in the same preamble, he used the term license. Now, license is a legal term. Now, license does not give rise to a traditional home, so to speak, in layman terms. Now, a license is not an indefeasible title against the whole world. A license is not even a lease. So when you go to a football match, you have a license. That means you can be kicked out anytime. It's not the same as having a lease. And therefore, again, I said I wish Councillor Nye had not put this up because his argument is flawed. It actually weakens the argument for any funding, because on one hand he's saying that the Marion Street Theatre for Young People was kicked out of their traditional home. They need a home. They didn't have a home in the first place. It's a license. If I may ask, I know that David Castle is a lawyer. I'm happy to receive his correspondence later on if I'm wrong, but if I may ask our corporate lawyer to distinguish an indivisible title such as a lease or an RP and that of a license. If I may, Madam Mayor?
You may ask that question. Mr. Taylor, would you be able to respond to that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Councillors. The main distinguishing characteristic between a licence and a lease is that a lease provides for exclusive possession of land, whereas a licence provides a right to occupy land that's not exclusive, and it's less than an interest in land in a property sense.
So if I may follow up.
Yes, Councillor
Now
Spencer.
then, we have businesses, for instance, in shopping centres like Mr. Minute or sushi shops. Not shops. Booths, for instance. Now they are license holders, and then you have shops like Woolworths and other stores where they have actual shops. Now, to make things simple, let's not consider all of them as licensees. Now, those...
Madam Mayor, excuse me, Councillor Spencer.
Yes.
Councillor Shadow,
Look,
is this a point of order?
relevance. Yes,
Yes, it is relevant.
I can't for the life of me see the relevance of this.
I think I can see where Councillor Spencer's...
I'm trying to establish my argument. I'm trying to explain to this council that this argument for funding Marion Street Theatre, having a strong argument and using home, traditional home, and so on as the reason is actually flawed. Okay? Because I will not repeat myself, Marion Street Theatre for Young People never had a lease. They only had a license, and that can be taken away easily. So I think the original motion is...
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
Point of order?
May I ask, excuse me,
Sure.
Councillor Spencer, through you, Madam Mayor, of Director Bevan. To your knowledge, Director Bevan...
I'm
did
sorry,
the
point of
management-
order, she can't ask a question.
Yeah, it's a point of order, or questions have to wait till the speaker's finished.
Well, the point of order is that Councillor Spencer is arguing that Marion Street Theatre didn't have a home because it only
I
had
think
a
I-
license, not a lease.
Yes, and
My
I
question was,
It's
have
a
they ever
question-
had
question
a
of
lease?
point of order.
it's not a point of order, Councillor Chateau, and we have to wait for questions
It's a
until...
point of clarification.
We need to clarify that
We
as a
do.
later question. Councillor Spencer has the floor.
I'm about to finish, Madam Mayor, thank you. So what I'm trying to say is I think we have been very generous in the original motion with as little said as possible, because again, Marion Street itself is in Gordon. Marion Street Theatre for Young People is a production company in a building. It used to be in a building in Gordon. If the name was different, Ku-ring-gai Theatre for Young People, too late to change that name now, then it will be different. Then you can say it's for whole Ku-ring-gai. Now, coming back to the argument for this reason, the argument for to support this funding is completely flawed. I'm happy for Councillor Nye to have this on record and for future law students and all that to see, that is really very funny. Very, very funny. You can't say someone has a home when they didn't. It's like a visitor coming through to your house and they say, I have a home in your house. No, you're a squatter at most. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say that I can't support this. Thank you.
Understood. Councillor Shatter, you may ask a question
Thank
now.
you, Madam Mayor. Of Director Bevan. Director Bevan, to your knowledge, has the Marion Street Theatre for Young People ever had a lease at the Marion Street Theatre? I'm not sure myself, which is why I'm asking you.
Director Bevan.
Madam Mayor and Councillors, this was a question that was asked in the build-up to tonight. We did do some searching through property, and Councillor Nye is correct. There was a 12-month, and it was actually called a licence for 12 months. But then the wording is, it's a licence agreement for 12 months in line with the resolution of council. So this came from a resolution of council, and I can't remember, I don't know why, but it was there, but it was only for 12 months.
Yes. And how long have Marion Street Theatre for Young People, how long did they occupy a space at Marion Street Theatre? Through you, Madam Mayor, to Director Bevan.
Yes, Director Bevan.
Is that just a couple of years, or 10 years, or 15 years?
Madam Mayor and Councillors, I believe they've been there for quite some time, because they were there even when the other theatre company was there as well. So they've been there for perhaps 20, 30 years?
20, 30 years, at least 20, 30 years. And so 30 years ago, they still had a licence?
Well, Madam Mayor and Councillors, I'd be very wary of trying to answer that question, because I really don't know, and I don't know if we have any documentation to prove either way.
No, I think my point is, I think that for Marion Street Theatre for Young People to call the actual theatre building home makes sense. They were there for 30 years or more years. Of course they saw it as a home. And I'd support Councillor Nye's background, that he's researched for that reason. And I think it's a very good piece of research. Thank you.
Thank you. I would remind councillors too, though, that traditional undertakings of the council over past decades doesn't necessarily mean it's appropriate at the current time or going into the future. And I know that our staff have identified various anomalies, not necessarily related to this group, but over time anomalies are identified where things haven't been formalised in place and may not be appropriate going forward under past protocols. So we all need to be mindful of those sort of issues going forward. If there are no further speakers on this amendment, I will put Councillor Nye's amendment. All those in favour? That is Councillor Nye, Councillor Chateau, Councillor Smith. Against? Councillors Clark, Pettit, Spencer, Greenfield, Kelly, Kay, Anderson. That is lost. Therefore, we have one motion on the floor, which is Councillor Spencer's former... Sorry? Yes. Councillor Spencer's former amendment that was carried and is now the motion. So, do you...
Councillor Shadow sums up because she was the mover of the original.
Now, the General Manager has just said, although we're in this position, it's Councillor Chateau who has the right to sum up because she moved the original motion. Councillor Chateau.
This is unusual. I haven't done this before.
I appreciate, Councillor Chateau, that you haven't been in this position before. I don't think we have had this circumstance arise before, but yes, you are able to sum up on the original motion.
I sum up on the original motion, which is my motion.
Correct.
Right. Just very briefly, the reason that I put that forward, because I could see that, like Councillor and I could see the core funding was needed for 3 years, so Marion Street Theatre for Young People organisation could plan ahead, not just for 1 year at a time. And I think, and it's disappointing that we haven't had support in that area. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, councillors, although Councillor Chatto has summed up on the original motion, the motion that is being put is Councillor Spencer's amendment that was carried and becomes the motion. All those in favour? That is Councillors Nye, Clark, Spencer, Greenfield, Kelly, Kay, Anderson. Against? That is Councillors Pettit, Chatto and Smith. That is carried. We now move on to GB3, funding for major projects, and that was withdrawn by Councillor Chatto. GB3. Is there a motion, please?
Madam Mayor, yes, I have a motion.
Thank you, Councillor Chatto.
If that could be brought up. No, this is for GB3.
GB3, funding for major projects.
Thank you. I'll just read this out.
Thank you.
I wish to move an alternative to the officers receive a note recommendation for GB3 to this short report on funding for major projects. The motion A, that funds from the eventual sale of the Gordon Bowling Club site be sequestered to fund the reconstruction of the Marion Street Theatre. B, that in the unlikely event that the sale of the Gordon Bowling Club site not be realised in time for construction to proceed smoothly from the tender and detailed design stage, that funding be sought from the New South Wales Government low-cost loan initiative, which assumes principal interest payments over 10 years at 1%, and which assumes a 50% interest rate subsidy. Councillors, the great irony...
Sorry, Councillor
I need
Chatto.
a seconder.
The seconder for this motion. There's no seconder, it lapses. No, there's a seconder. Councillor Greenfield is seconding that. Councillor Chatto, you may speak to that now.
Councillor Smith. Councillors, the great irony of the last 3 years with regard to the will of Council, which was to rebuild the Marion Street Theatre, is that it has not been funded by a particular asset sale. As Mr Luffman pointed out in his address to Council last week, and with which Director Watson agreed in his email to councillors just yesterday, ratepayers' money has been spent on DA preparation for a project that Council has never decided to nominate a particular fund for. Director Watson has consistently reminded us that asset sales as a source of funding is not specific enough, and it leaves the rebuilding of the theatre unfunded, and this is clearly unsatisfactory. The question I'd like us to contemplate is this: do we or do we not want to see a new theatre rising from the old? At last Council's meeting, several councillors, who then voted to defer such a decision to this meeting, assured the community that they supported the Marion Street Theatre. Yet, no one, with the exception of Councillor Clark, was prepared to support its funding. Councillors, the community has remarked on how hollow are such assurances. Ku-ring-gai has been without a theatre for over 20 years, while successive councils have twiddled their thumbs and a succession of consultants have expended time and ratepayers' funds producing copious reports and visions for an upgrade. Consultants have been brought in to review the cultural needs of the community, and to an organisation they have supported utilising the existing theatre. I see in the budget that yet another team of consultants has been brought in again to look into this apparently vexed issue. I ask you, where is the will to move forward on this project? Surely the longer it takes to begin to action the DA, the greater will be the construction costs. And I'd like you to think about this. In fact, are construction costs likely to increase at a greater rate than the cost of interest on a loan? I asked our Director Corporate to look into this, as I'm not a mathematician. Director Marshall's calculations reveal that if, in simplistic terms, Council borrowed $15.1 million at 1% per annum, it would incur interest on the loan of $151,000 a year. If, on the other hand, the construction costs increased with the forecast inflation of 2.1%, the cost of construction would increase by $317,000 per annum. So, ignoring other considerations, if the project was funded by a loan, it would be better off, the council would be better off, by $166,000 a year, compared to deferring the project and the costs increasing by inflation. And this is assuming we received a subsidised loan. And again, Director Marshall has assured me that he's spoken to government and these loans will be made available. One has to apply, of course. For this reason, I urge councillors to vote for this motion and take advantage of the opportunity to save council a significant amount of outgoings by ensuring the Marion Street Theatre project moves ahead speedily and efficiently. The officer's recommendation begs you to do nothing about securing the rebuilding of the Marion Street Theatre. And I must say that I was somewhat taken aback in the email that Director Watson sent to councillors, where he said that the Marion Street Theatre was really, I don't think he used the words at the bottom of the pile, but he said it was at the bottom of the pecking order. And when I asked for clarification on that, he said, well, we have funding for the St Ives basketball courts, and we have funding for the west side of Linfield development. It's been sequestered, the funding has been sequestered for that from the library site and from a loan. But we don't have anything in concrete for Marion Street Theatre, and if we want to do that, then this, I believe, is the way to do it. I commend this to you, councillors.
Councillor Greenfield as seconder.
I'll reserve my right. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on this motion? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm concerned about lapsing, so I'm just going to move the. I'd like to move the officer's original motion as an amendment.
Thank you. So you're moving the officer's recommendation. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded, Councillor Spencer. Councillor Clark, do you wish to speak to that?
Just very briefly, Madam Mayor, I think when we look at the amount of projects that are funded from asset sales, we're looking at a total of $117.5 million to be funded from asset sales. We have quite a large amount of projects within this. So I'm always concerned about how we're going to fund these projects. I think Marion Street Theatre, of course, is an important project, and it's one of the projects that we have listed as part of our asset sales. I suppose I'm concerned about specifically locking us into a particular funding model at this stage. Whether I think it's better to look into a funding model once we get to that stage and once councils and the future council's position is more clear as to what they want to do. I think Marion Street Theatre is very important, and it's something that we need to pursue as a council along with all our other major projects, but to lock us into a particular funding model is not something that I would want to do at this stage, so I'd be more comfortable with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Spencer, a seconder. Do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I think the officer's recommendation is a good one, and Councillor Clark's speech is a good one as well. I urge all councillors to support this amendment. Thank you.
I just might ask Director Watson, if you're the right director to ask. Just a little bit concerned that there's a view that council hasn't done anything towards the Marion Street Theatre project. I was just wondering if you could outline what we have done to date.
Madam Mayor, point of clarification.
Yes, Councillor Shatto.
I don't think I ever said that we hadn't done anything towards.
Well, I guess it was...
It's the future.
Twiddling our thumbs, and I guess I take a bit of a question mark over that we've just twiddled our thumbs. Director.
Through you, Madam Mayor, councillors. Over the last couple of years, council will all remember it was about this time 3 years ago, there was a resolution to effectively go back and rebuild the Marion Street Theatre. Since that time, we've had a team of architects and other consultants prepare and submit a development application. So we've got a fully documented development application in the system in the final stages of assessment. I don't like to preempt when that might be, but I would expect it to be in a matter of 3 or 4 months, subject to the whims of and timing of planning panel meetings, City North planning panel meetings. But it's I'm quite proud of it. It's a project I put the last couple of years into. I think given the budget we were given, I think we haven't kept everybody happy, Madam Mayor, but I think we've managed to stretch the budget about as far as we can. So I think we've done an awful lot in the past 3 years. I certainly wouldn't call it twiddling our thumbs, no.
Thank you, Director. If there's no further speakers on this item, then, and councillors, remember we're dealing with an amendment. We need to only debate the amendment at this stage and vote on it. So if there's no further speakers, I'll put the amendment moved by Councillor Clark, which is the officer's recommendation. All those in favour? That is Councillors Nye, Clark, Pettit, Spencer, Greenfield, Smith, Kelly, Kay, Anderson. Against Councillor Shatto. The amendment becomes the motion. I now put that motion. All those in favour? That is Councillors Nye, Clark, Pettit, Spencer, Greenfield, Smith, Kelly, Kay, Anderson. Against Councillor Shatto. That is carried. We now move to GB 10. No, we've done that one.
Extra reports.
Sorry. We move to extra reports circulated to the meeting. General Manager.
There are none, Madam Mayor.
And also we move therefore to motions of which due notice has been given. NM1, Kalara Bowling Club and Kalara Lawn Tennis Club, which was withdrawn by Councillor Nye. Is there a motion, please? Councillor Shatto.
I think I need a win. Yes, I'd like to move the notice of motion as printed.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded Councillor Greenfield. Do you wish to speak to that now, Councillor Shatto?
Yes, I'll simply read that out, I think, and that's self-explanatory.
Thank you.
It's been brought to Council's attention by members of the Kalara community that the level of heritage significance that should be attributed to Kalara Bowling Club and Kalara Lawn Tennis Club might be considerably higher than reflected in its mere inclusion within the Springdale Conservation Area. This is an oversight that needs to be investigated further. Recreation facilities on the site have been in continuous use since mid-1916, having been established with the assistance of the father of Kalara, John George Edwards, who subdivided the Springdale estate. Council was unable to consider placing an interim heritage order over the properties due to their inclusion in the Springdale Conservation Area. Consequently, members of the community approached Heritage New South Wales directly to ascertain if the Minister would in fact place an interim heritage order on the properties. While the Minister declined to make an IHO in this instance, Heritage New South Wales wrote to Council advising, among other things, that Heritage New South Wales has undertaken a preliminary review of the club's heritage significance and determined the Kalara Bowling Club and Kalara Lawn Tennis Club are not likely to be of state heritage significance, though they may be of local significance. Heritage New South Wales further advise that they encourage Council to consider reviewing Killara Bowling Club and Killara Lawn Tennis Club as part of its review of items within the Springdale Road Heritage Conservation Area, and engage with Mr Miller and the community in assessing the site's local heritage. I therefore move that as a matter of urgency, staff carry out a preliminary review of the heritage significance of the Killara Bowling Club and Killara Lawn Tennis Club, and B, a report be brought back to Council's June meeting outlining the results of the preliminary review of heritage significance with a view to initiating a planning proposal to list the properties as heritage items in Council's local environment plan, if appropriate.
Thank you, Councillor Shadow. Was that you reading out what you are moving, or was that your debate on the matter? That was your debate, was it?
That's a statement, yes, of
All right.
the
Well,
notice of motion.
Thank you. I didn't understand that at the beginning, so I don't think I've called for a seconder for that. So I do need a seconder for... Oh, you did? Councillor Greenfield, sorry. Okay, that's good. So we now move to Councillor Greenfield, then a seconder, if you wish to speak to this.
No, I'll defer for the vote. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment or an alternate motion to this.
Yes, as an amendment.
As an amendment.
Do the staff have the wording?
Yes, the staff have the wording. I will start reading it.
Okay.
I therefore move that A, Council acknowledges that in recent years there has been a trend for organisations to propose and consider, but not yet action, consolidating bowling clubs and tennis sites across the LGA in order to build other assets and deliver other services. B, as a matter of urgency, staff carry out a preliminary review of the heritage significance of the Gordon Bowling Club at 4 Pennant Avenue, the Roseville Chase Bowling Club at 47 Warrain Road, the Linfield Library and Tennis Site at 259 to 271 Pacific Highway, the Killara Bowling Club and the Killara Lawn Tennis Club. All of these sites will concurrently undergo preliminary review to assure residents and other affected stakeholders that the same measuring stick for heritage value has been used consistently, not just for assets that Council does not own, such as Killara, but also for assets that Council does own, such as Gordon, Roseville Chase and Linfield. Point C, a report be brought back to Council's June meeting outlining the results of the preliminary review of heritage significance with a view to initiating a planning proposal to list the properties as heritage items in Council's local environment plan, if appropriate. I'd like to seek a seconder to this.
Yes, is there a seconder for this amendment? There, sorry, Councillor Kay, you got your light on to second that or not?
Oh, no, not to second.
No. That lapses as there's no sorry, Councillor Kelly.
Are you seeking a seconder, Madam Mayor?
For Councillor Nye's amendment.
I'll second Councillor Nye's amendment.
Thank you.
I have a question though, and that's, I think, what Councillor Kay is about to ask.
Well, Councillor Nye has moved that. Councillor Kelly has seconded. So before we get to other speakers, we need to ask Councillor Nye if he wishes to speak to it.
I'd like to speak to it, but is it okay if I hear Councillor Kay's question first?
You can
I'll reserve
your
my right then.
But I need to ask Councillor Kelly first whether a seconder he wishes to speak now.
I'll reserve my right too. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
So the next speaker is indeed Councillor Kay.
Okay, now this probably relates to Sam and what...
Councillor Nye.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Nye, sorry. I'm used to calling him Sam. In relation to the time frame, so we're talking about bringing this report back to Council's June meeting. To me, this looks like a lot of work in such a short time frame, considering that would only be a week or so. So could you please correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe refer me to the correct director or ask that question, how much time would be required to fulfil this exercise?
I think that would be Director Watson.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I will deal with Killara Bowling Club and Lawn Tennis Club separately because we had effectively advance notice, given they were already on the agenda back in February, March, and have been through a state government agency. So there is some work there. So it is certainly possible to get a report back on those sites in June. As for starting with a number of other sites fresh and turning around a report in 2 weeks, I very rarely say that something's impossible, but that is impossible.
Thank you.
Can I sort of add to that?
More questions, Councillor
Yeah, no,
Kay?
it's sort of an add-on. So I suppose maybe what would you recommend? Would we say July? Director Watson?
Director Watson?
August?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I wouldn't even like to hazard a guess at the moment. It's a long time since we've had permanent heritage staff in our building at all. I'm relying on a consultant a couple of days a week. I'm not even sure I can guarantee that.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Nye, your light's on.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to tweak point C then. Instead of June meeting, let's call it July. July meeting. And then can I please speak to this amendment now?
Can I?
Oh, actually I need the seconder to.
Yes, Councillor Kelly, are you happy to incorporate that
I'd like to
change?
see it at least July. Pardon me, at least August.
Okay, let's
Madam
make it
Mayor.
August.
All right, the
Great negotiator.
mover and the seconder have agreed to change that wording to August. Councillor Clark, Councillor Nye, you've still got your light on?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Can I please speak to this amendment now?
Yes, you may.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Personally, I have no issues with the Killara Bowling and Tennis Club site potentially getting an interim heritage order. I'm not opposed to that concept, but I'm just anticipating a future problem which we may have, which is if council were to say, yes, we're okay with an interim heritage order on this particular asset in Killara.
Point of clarification. Councillor Nye, I don't believe it's an interim heritage order we're talking about.
Councillor Shadow, sorry, but that is not a point of order. That's debate. Councillor Nye, continue.
If we were to start investigating this for Killara, but then we were not to apply the same standard to the other bowling clubs and other tennis sites across the council, then we may be in a position further down the line in 2-3 years' time when someone might say, look, how come council treats its own assets in a certain way but holds a completely different measuring sticks for an asset that it doesn't own? So that's just what I'm personally uncomfortable with. That's why I've brought this before council. I know that we would have considered the heritage value of these 3 sites to some extent as we started proposing the potential rezoning of these 3 sites. So I know some of the work has already taken place in the past. It's a matter of just digging it up, reviewing it, refreshing it, and aligning it with the same measuring stick as what potentially may be held for Killara. But personally, I'd like to just have the same standard applied for all of these sites, irrespective of whether council owns it or whether a bowling club owns it or whether a tennis club owns it. If we have consistency for all of these assets, then personally I'm quite comfortable with it. Personally, I can support this. And what will happen as a result of this report that's brought back to the August meeting? Well, it may well be that council staff say that all of these sites have heritage value that meets a certain threshold, or they might say that none of them have heritage value that meets a certain threshold, or they might say that combinate, like some of them do and some of them don't. I can't anticipate what the result will be, but all I can say right now, personally speaking, is that I'd like the same measuring stick to be used for all of the assets, and that way we can't be accused as a council in the future for having preferential treatment of one site over another, preferential treatment of potentially one landowner over another. I just want to see consistency applied to everything. And I know it's probably caused a bit of a stir moving this motion, but at the end of the day, I just want to see consistency applied to all the sites. Thank you.
Councillor Nye, I'd like to speak against that argument because we haven't had, as the director referred to, communication from a state government agency about those other sites that you're talking about. So if you're at odds with the state government and the Heritage Council because they've only written about these sites, then perhaps you should address your concerns there. Council is responding to what was correspondence received from the state government agency. Councillor Clark, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to speak against this motion.
The amendment?
Yes, this amendment, so apologies. How many buildings are in Ku-ring-gai? I've got a feeling it's, 50, 60,000 buildings? Not sure, it's a lot, This is a really weird cherry-picked list. Just because they happen to be sports clubs, they've put in this arbitrary list together. But it's not even a full list of sports clubs. It's not a full list of, all locations across Ku-ring-gai you can play tennis. It's a very confusing cherry-picked list that's just coming across as councillor's pet projects to protect his own ward. I see no reason why we should support this. As you clearly pointed out, Madam Mayor, the the Clara Bowling Club and Clara Lawn Tennis Club, that's a response to the state government. We're not just chucking in other random projects because we happen to think about that building at the time, even though there's been no request for us to look into this. Why don't we just start looking into every building in Ku-ring-gai? There's really, in fact, that's really actually what a previous council did when we actually did, heritage zones for the large swaths of Ku-ring-gai. The previous council decided to do that, and we know how that ended up. So no, I don't support this motion. I feel it's very confusing. It is not the same. You cannot compare Clara Bowling Club to Linfield Library to Gordon Bowling Club. They are three separate sites. They should not be put in the same list. And I think it's inappropriate to do as such. I'm quite comfortable to support Clara and the Clara Bowling Club and Tennis Club, as that is a request. However, for these other sites, I have no interest, and I wouldn't want to see this motion go forward. Thank you.
The next speaker is Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I must confess I saw the merit in Councillor Chatto's notice of motion, but when Councillor Nye put up his amendment, I could see greater merit in expanding that list a little. Maybe it's not every sports club in the LGA, as Councillor Clark correctly says, but it's a damn fine start. If we were to list every sports club, I dare say Director Watson would be overwhelmed, and his diary would be very full, although he might be recruiting some people to achieve it. I think there's a lot of merit in going beyond the original list that Councillor Chatto put up, and I'm aware that there's been some argy-bargy going on around the clubs with strategies to take over one club with another and sell off part of the club to put up blocks of flats or do whatever. And I think that this amendment that Councillor Nye is suggesting, if it's successful, will allow the clubs to remain as they are, if it's successful, as I say, and we won't lose them to inappropriate development along the way. Now, J.G. Edwards had a vision for Clara, and I totally respect the effort that was put into that original vision and the preservation of that vision that's gone on since then. But I also see the benefit of extending it beyond just that area of the LGA into a greater area, with the view that in turn sometime down the track we might go further still to the northern part of the LGA so that no one feels left out. So I would support this motion and hope others would as well. Thank you.
The amendment. Councillor Greenfield, you're the next speaker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to ask a question. Councillor Nye has referred to Council's he wants to use the same measuring stick. Through you, Madam Mayor, to the relevant director, is there a formula or a format that heritage properties are assessed by, or is it there's no formula at all, therefore it's up to the person who's looking at its ideas?
I'll refer that to Director Watson.
Through you, Madam Mayor, there is in fact a measuring stick, though we would call it 7 particular criteria that deal with aesthetics, social association and things like that, but there is a measuring stick.
So therefore, through you, Madam Mayor, to the Director, the properties would be measured against the same criteria regardless of whether they were assessed this month or in 3 months or in
Correct.
12 months?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. So therefore, just to clarify, consistency would be applied because we'd be using the same standards and the same measurements each time, correct? Director?
That's correct.
Lovely, thank you, that's it. So I would like to speak against this amendment, and the main reason is that the two clubs that Councillor Chateau's original motion is about are at risk, and we have had correspondence, as you pointed out, Madam Mayor, from the state government, and I don't believe that the logic that Councillor Nye has put this motion up about is correct as per Director Watson's information, that there is a consistent measurement that all heritage properties are measured by when they're assessed. Thank you.
The next speaker is Councillor Kay. Sorry.
I believe we've had 2 for and 2 against.
General Manager.
On the amendment, Madam Mayor, we have had Councillors Nye and Kelly for, Mayor Anderson, Councillors Clark and Greenfield against. Correct.
So, Councillor Chateau, you would like to move that the motion be, or the amendment in this case, be put?
Yes, the amendment.
Is there a seconder for that? Seconded Councillor Smith. All those in favour of the motion being put now, that is Councillors Clark, Greenfield, Spencer, Chateau, Smith, Anderson. Against, that is Councillors Nye, Pettit, Kelly, Kay. It's carried that we now put this amendment. So I am putting what is Councillor Nye's amendment now. All those in favour, that is Councillor Nye, Pettit, Kelly. Against, Councillors Clark, Greenfield, Chateau, Spencer, Smith, Kay, Anderson. I think I got everybody then. So that amendment is lost, and we now move back to the original motion, which is Councillor Chateau's motion for further debate, should there be speakers remaining. If there are no further speakers, I'll ask Councillor Chateau to sum up, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, as Councillor Greenfield intimated, these heritage properties are under some duress, or these potentially heritage properties are under some duress, and we are responding to a higher order that we've been advised by Heritage New South Wales to consider reviewing, and this is really what this notice of motion is about reviewing the heritage
significance?
Heritage
values?
Values, thank you. The heritage values of the Clara Bowling Club and the Clara Lawn Tennis Club. So over to you, Councillor.
Councillors, I'm now putting Councillor Chateau's motion. All those in favour. That is Councillors Clark, Greenfield, Chateau, Smith, Anderson. Against, Councillors Nye, Pettit, Spencer, Kelly, Kay. The votes being equal, I use my casting vote in favour of Councillor Chateau's motion. That is carried. We now move to NM2, Marion Street Theatre refurbishment. Is there a motion, please? Councillor Chateau.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move the motion as printed.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer.
Do you wish to speak to that motion, Councillor Shadow?
I'd like to read it. The draft, this is very similar to what I had actually mooted last meeting, and which was part of our decision to defer. The draft April 2021 revised delivery program for 2018 to 2022 and the operational plan 2021 to 2022, a 103-page document, is currently on exhibition. Key projects proposed for 2021 and 2022 include, among others, St Ives Indoor Sports Complex and Marion Street Theatre, page 6. These projects are given special attention in the Council agenda documents for the OMC of 27th of April. That was last month. However, the Marion Street Theatre project is not included in the 2021-22 draft budget exhibition, as there is no funding allocated in that financial year. The Marion Street Theatre timeline and funding graph on page 38 of the papers shows funding in 2021 and 2023, but not in 2022. The community needs to be reassured that work on moving the project to construction phase and tender phase will progress continuously, so that when funds become available from asset sales or some other form of revenue, that there be no further delays. I therefore move that funds quarantined for the Marion Street Theatre refurbishment from general revenue in the 2022-23 financial year be moved to the 2021-2022 financial year, along with any unspent funds carried forward from the 21 to 22 year, as indicated on page 38 of the above-mentioned agenda document. Councillors, I seek a
Seconder, yes, we need a... We have had a seconder, Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, we did.
Good.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer.
Councillors, this doesn't involve spending any more money. It simply is shifting money from one year to an earlier year, so work can be done on getting detailed design work and tender documents ready for an eventual reconstruction of the theatre. It's simply for a matter of efficiency, and I think you need to think about this and support this notice of motion.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. As seconder, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I might be repeating myself a little bit if I said that I was one of the propounders of the motion in 2018, I think it was, where there were 6 councillors that put their names onto a very grand motion. And amongst the things that were listed in that notice of motion was to refurbish the Marion Street Theatre. Now, there are reasons why we felt at that time that the Marion Street Theatre should be refurbished and not bulldozed. And for some reason, should I say that development, not as in the development in the building, the progress of the project headed very nicely, and then somehow it was stalled. And I feel that the people have been misled a little bit if we do not conclude our term by at least putting this back in the project list, so to speak, and then let the next council decide on whether they want to proceed with the actual building refurbishment, or they wish to sell it bulldoze the building, put Marion Street Theatre for young people, or the adult one into 828, who knows? But at least in my term of council, I would like to see the promises that we've made be honored. Now, I'm a little bit disappointed, although I have to be honest, I'm not a very big fan of Marion Street Theatre, the building or the theatre for young people. But I feel that, look, I believe in integrity. That's very important. If I said I was going to do something, I have to do it. Right? I made this promise. I put my name in that notice of motion, one of the 6 councillors, and I feel that if I retract what I have done in 2018, it has to be a very good reason why. I can't find a good reason why that we shouldn't unfreeze, so to speak, this project and to let it carry on. It has been delayed, and I know that Mr. Townend has been chasing and has been very patient, very, very patient. And I think the least we could do in this council term is to put this back in the agenda and let it have some life, and then let the next council decide what they want to do. They may very well, and I don't think Mr. Townend likes to hear this, may very well bulldoze the building. Who knows? Thank you. I didn't say I was speaking for this motion.
Councillor Kay, you're the next speaker. Are you wishing to oppose this motion?
No, I want to ask a question.
Question?
Is that okay?
Yes, that's certainly fine.
Okay. So referring to the notice of motion, it stipulates that the funding wasn't allocated for 2022. So just through you, Madam Mayor, to the relevant director, why, for the sake of transparency to everyone here and listening, why that wasn't allocated in 2022 and was allocated in 2023, and what the consequences are, so the differences between allocating now for 2022 rather than 2023. Thank you.
Director Marshall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the funding that we're talking about from general revenue is an amount of $900,000, and it was pushed back to 2023 along with the $10 million from asset sales at that same period. So it's a more conservative approach to push it back a year, because we're not certain at this stage whether we will achieve any asset sales that might be applicable for this project. So by bringing it forward, it enables more design work to be done in the next financial year, which would bring the project to the position where it could be constructed. But if the asset sales don't happen, then you've spent that money and you might not need it at that point. So it's just a matter of whether council wishes to proceed, whether or not assets are sold or not, or they want to wait until they know more in 12 months' time about our asset sales likelihood.
Thank you.
The speakers that have their lights on now are just clarifying you're wishing to speak against this. Yes? Against? Against. Thank you. We'll continue debate then. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was one of the original people in 2018 that Councillor Spencer referred to about putting our names to the moving of Marion Street Theatre onto the long-term financial plan, and I stand by that decision. I think it was a good idea, and I think it's a good idea now. The reason I'm speaking against this motion now is that, and you know, I've always supported Marion Street Theatre. I don't see the point, actually, because we don't have any concrete, no pun intended, plans to do anything in the next financial year, and I think because Councillor Spencer mentioned bulldozer 6 times, he can't really be speaking in favour. Anyway, that was a joke. I think if we did nothing it wouldn't affect anything. There's no plan to spend money on Marion Street Theatre next year. There's no plan to do anything. There's no looming asset sales that will give us the impetus to be able to do anything. So by doing nothing, we're not denying Marion Street Theatre its rightful place on our agenda for future. It just seems like shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic, for those who are old enough to know what that means. We're moving numbers around on a piece of paper that don't really translate into any action being taken, any progress on the development of the theatre. I'd be over the moon if we had the ability to move the project forward and do something substantial with regard to DAs progressing, with tenders progressing, with construction actually happening and someone turning a sod of earth to mark the refurbishment. But I think pragmatism has to take over at some point, and we stop basically chasing rainbows because we don't have the money, we don't have within the foreseeable future the ability in the next 12 months to do anything. So why are we wasting our time with this numbers exercise? And that's the only reason that I think this is just a waste of time, and I'd speak against the motion. Thank you.
I might just, on that point, make a comment contrary to your view, because over my years on council there have been a number of projects that we would have liked to progress as a council when opportunities came up for grants from other levels of government, but a significant proviso on those grants were that the project was shovel ready. And that is a key point in many grants. Now, I'm not saying we will see grants for this project or any particular projects, but it is important to progress projects to the stage of being shovel ready to have any opportunity to move quickly for grant applications if they do arise. And I would note there has been a propensity recently for different levels of government to support the creative arts, so we can live in hope in that regard, but we do need to be shovel ready. Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to speak very briefly against this motion. Now, as some people have said, there was a motion back in May 2018, of which I was one of 6 councillors who were in support of delivering a number of assets across Ku-ring-gai, potentially at the cost of selling some other assets. Now, I am also a man of my word, a person of my word, whatever. And when I stick to my word, I actually mean it. If I said I'd do something, I will do it. And when I talk about my word, back in May 2018, of which most of it I drafted, it came as a package. It wasn't just Marion Street Theatre in isolation. It wasn't just St Ives Basketball in isolation. It also included the East Linfield Community Hall, which, by the way, if that had actually happened, the Marion Street Theatre for young people would actually have a, dare I say, home right now, because that would be built much larger, great place for drama. And I'll move on because however,
relevance.
Point of order.
Point of order. Relevance.
Relevance. Please stick to this particular topic, Councillor Nye.
However, if I look at the City North Planning Panel website now, it says there's a DA already lodged for the Marion Street Theatre here. 2 Marion Street, Kilara 2071. It was lodged in May 2020. There was a briefing in April 2021. Things are well underway, and as soon as this DA is approved, and I don't know when it will be approved because it's outside of council's control, but from my perspective, as soon as this is approved, the project is pretty close to shovel ready, if not shovel ready already. It just needs an approval of the DA. So if in the future, and especially if it's the next council term with the councillors, the new councillors who have to deal with it, if in next council term we say, look, we've got a DA that's been approved, look, maybe circumstances have changed and we've got some additional funding, we can just kickstart this now instead of waiting a few more months, or if there's a bit of a grant that has come in to help with the arts, perhaps we can expedite the process. But when it goes back down to, at the end of the day, a lot of this is dependent on asset sales, whether or not it goes ahead or not. I don't want to preempt an answer to that, especially since we've seen, or we've all thought that asset sales might have occurred already, but since a lot of that has taken quite a bit of some time, I don't want to preempt a response and jump on it and say, yes, it's happening. It might not be happening for a whole range of reasons. And so I don't want us to commit, while I do support the Marion Street Theatre and I want to see it built, I don't want to lock us down a path to spend extra money on something that may or may not happen at that particular point in time. I think it is wiser to wait for this development application to go through its course. It may well be that the City North Planning Panel, when it gives consent to this development application, they might say, look, there's a few conditions precedent or whatever it's called, a few conditions for approval, and it may involve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the following items. I don't know what it is that they're going to say, what conditions they will apply for this application to progress, and it's better for us to wait for the City North Planning Panel to tell us what it is, whether or not this is approved in the first place, and then secondly, under what conditions. Once we have that information, and also once we have a new council term, we will then be able to be in a better position also to look at our finances and to look at whether there are any other grants out there to say, look, do we want to change our plan? And just because we have a plan doesn't mean we have to stick to it hard and fast. If circumstances change, then we can change our course of action. It happens all the time. So personally, I do commend the council staff's original plan of the timing of when money will most likely be spent. It's an estimate only. If circumstances change, we might push the spend forward, but I don't want to jump the gun and push the spend forward just for the sake of some optics of being seen to be doing something that we're pretty much on the path of doing anyway. So I would advise, or I would encourage councillors to not support this motion. I would encourage councillors to just wait it out a bit, wait for this development application to be approved, and then to allow us as councillors or the next council term to make the relevant decision. Thank you.
Councillor Shadow, do you want to... questions? Thank you.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Through you to Director Watson. Director Watson, tell me, what is the progress of Gordon Bowling Club's rezoning application to the Department of Planning?
Director Watson.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I might be a little bit rubby around the timelines, but you will recall that both of them sat in the Minister's office for in excess of 16 months before we got gateway determinations. When we got gateway determinations, they both sites required significant additional work, and that took us in the order of 7 or 8 months. Detailed drainage designs, detailed urban design, detailed. They'd be the main two. We did some more work on contamination. Now, but all of that work's been completed, and we resubmitted those planning proposals back to the department in April. One of the gateway conditions required that they give additional concurrence to the changes we'd made to those documents before we went out to public exhibition, so we're still waiting on that to occur.
Thank you very much, and we really appreciate all the work that went into that, Director Watson. So that actually went off to the Department of Planning in April.
I can give you an exact date tomorrow if you want, but it was towards the end of April.
So we're just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
In fact. All right.
Probably a month.
Probably a month ago. So it's not as though the potential for an asset sale is totally unrealistic. We don't know what's happened, but the work's been done, and it's up to the Department of Planning at the moment to move it forward.
Correct. We've still got to go through exhibition, but yes, closer than we've ever been, Councillor Shadow.
Yes, closer than we've ever been. Yep. So we can be a little bit. We can be more optimistic. My second question is what does it need to be shovel ready for for this project? What more needs to be done?
Director.
Through you, Madam Mayor. A development application is generally, when council does them, it's documented to about 40-45%. When we did the Village Green, the extra documentation before we went to tender, we took the documentation to in the order of 85 to 90%. And what that's led to, and I'll speak for Director Banassif here, is very little room for variation because the builder knew exactly what he was quoting on and exactly what he was expecting to build. So in terms of after you get a consent, there would be a 3-month procurement package for another piece of design work, probably 6 months worth of documentation, given we're talking about, $500,000 thereabouts worth of work. So to get the project from consent to shovel ready is, 9 months, Christmas sitting in the middle of it, and $500,000 thereabouts, probably a little bit more.
And this, in fact, is the funding that I'm talking about that needs to be moved from the back a year in order to be able to support that work that needs to be done to be shovel ready.
Questions?
And that is the end of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further speakers, though, Councillor Shadow, Councillor Greenfield, were you wanting to speak on this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, the Director. So we still have to get the DA approved, correct? We're not approved yet.
That's correct. As alluded to by Councillor Nye, the DA has been in for coming up to 12 months. The panel has been briefed on the project, and we would expect, can't guarantee, but we would expect a determination sometimes within the next 4 months would be not unreasonable to expect. So that takes us to the, very early in the next financial year.
Right, okay. So then there's a potential that this funding, you would need this funding sooner than when it's currently scheduled to come through between 2022-2023, or would council have the funding to do the detailed designs, etc.?
No, as alluded to by Director Marshall earlier, the reason that funding was pushed back, the documentation, you only would do that documentation from 40% through to 85% if you intended construction. So that's why it was pushed back. The proposition being put by Councillor Chateau is that we want to do that work, so we are shovel ready. So it's work we would have done, but you would only do it usually on the basis that you were going to fund construction.
Okay, and you would wait until the DA was approved before you would start?
Yes, we would, but that doesn't mean we can't start preparing documentation ready to go to tender, because at this point in time, we've been asked to provide some supplementary information to the assessment team, but we haven't been asked to make any changes to the plans, and I would consider that to be a relatively good sign at this point in time. At a similar point in time for the Linfield Village Green and the Linfield Village Library, for example, we would have done quite a bit of redocumentation with some quite significant changes to plans. Again, can't foresee a process that I'm not part of, but I'm taking a lack of request to change plans substantially as being a good sign.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question through you to Director Watson. Director Watson, you were saying before that, if I remember correctly, I don't want to quote you, that design paperwork and whatever hasn't been done. Is that because you're waiting for the DA to be approved and you don't want to invest time, money and other effort into something that may not eventually be approved? Or is it just because you haven't got the resources available to do it at the moment?
Director.
Through you, Madam Mayor, probably a couple of prongs to that that response, Councillor. We don't need to document to 85% to get a development consent, so you don't need to invest that money. And to use the basketball courts at St Ives, for example, because that's a Crown DA, that can't be refused and conditions can only be applied with their concurrence. They would document their DAs probably to the 85% mark. Because I can get a refusal or I can get conditions that may require some redesign, I would probably not tend to invest, because I don't need to, in that last stage of detailed documentation.
In that case then, if I might ask a follow-up question.
Councillor Kelly, could you please stand?
Certainly. Sorry about that. Do you see that there's merit in not making any further design progress until you get the DA approved? And given that the time frame that you kind of alluded to before, saying it'll be in the next financial year, perhaps before you expect the DA to be approved, if it is approved, that still puts it in enough time for a future term of council to bring forward the funding, if necessary, into the 2022 period, because it'll still be 2021.
Director.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I mean, theoretically, what you put to me is correct, but we all know, depending on the amount of turnover you get in a new council, you wouldn't get them to make a decision about funding a major project probably this side of Christmas ordinarily. Depending on how this notice of motion went tonight, I would know that I had money next financial year for documentation. At the very least, straight away, I would start preparing the quotation package to get the design work done. So it's not as if I'm doing nothing between now and when I get a consent. I would start to document the request for tender or a request for quotation for that design piece.
So,
question?
Sorry, I don't mean to be tedious. So this would give you comfort money, if I can use that expression, to do things in anticipation of a positive outcome from the SNPP.
Absolutely.
No worries. That's great. Thank you. That's what I'm...
Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have 3 questions for the Director, if I may. So the first one is, how much have we spent from 2018 to now?
Director.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Don't quote me exactly. I can provide you a detailed figure tomorrow, but it would be a little bit over $900,000.
Thank you. And second question, how much more do we need to spend to have up to the time of DA approval?
Up to the stage of DA approval, not doing any of the documentation work that Councillor Chateau is alluding to.
Correct.
Not very much at all, if anything.
An idea, please?
If it was $15,000 or $20,000, I would be surprised if it was that much.
So, sorry, if I may seek clarification.
Yes,
so if this motion fails, you still have money to conclude the DA?
Yes.
Thank you. So, last question. What was the plan for this site before the 2018 motion?
Director.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I don't know that I could answer that question off the top of my head.
Starts with B. That was a plan, wasn't it?
What was that? I missed the question.
Not having a plan is a plan as well. I'd just like to know what...
What was the plan?
Well, my plan only picked up when I was asked to document a DA in 2018. Before that, I wasn't managing the building.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, if I may. I'd like to know what the plan was for this particular site before the 2018 motion. I wasn't in the previous council.
Director Bevan, perhaps, or Director Banassif.
Madam Mayor.
If I may clarify, assuming...
General Manager.
Assuming if 2018 motion didn't happen, what would happen to this site?
Prior to 2018, Mayor and Councillors, Council was also looking at the Gordon Cultural Hub, and there was the opportunity to actually build a new theatre in the Gordon precinct, and there was certainly no commitment, financial commitment from the Council to totally refurb the current asset. So it essentially was just sitting there prior to that motion.
All right, if there are no further speakers, I'll ask Councillor Shadow to sum up, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it is, well, I suppose it is true that up until 2018, there was talk of having another site at Gordon. However, we did have consultants who came in and examined, talked to the community, talked to councillors, and what they did was they recommended that the site of the original theatre, the Marion Street Theatre, be used. And that we were told that we would never get a big theatre, it would never be viable in Gordon. So that's the history of that. This notice of motion is simply about shifting money that was already allocated to the Marion Street Theatre back a year so that we would be, in the words of the Mayor, shovel ready should we be able to apply for a grant application or some other sort of funding, or indeed if the asset sales come through. It's simply, it means there's not going to be a time lag, and in the end it will save us money, because the longer it goes on, the more it's going to cost because of inflation, and because construction costs will increase. So both financially and practically, I believe this is a good way to go.
Councillors, I'll put Councillor Shadow's motion. All those in favour? That is Councillors Clark, Spencer, Greenfield, Shadow, Smith, Kay, Anderson. Against Councillors Nye, Pettit and Kelly. That is carried. Councillors, we move now to business without notice, subject to clause 9.3 of the Code of Meeting Practice. None. Note that there is one question with notice that has been dealt with in the business papers. I don't think we have any inspections committees organised. Therefore, there is no further business tonight, and C1. We do have one. C1. So one item of business left, but that is in confidential. So I now seek a motion that Council move into closed session. Was that what you had your light on for, Councillor Clark? Moved Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Kelly. All those in favour? That is unanimous. We'll now go into closed session, and we'll move next door. Yeah. Councillors, we are back in open session and back with the live stream. In relation to C1, I am able to report that Council resolved to appoint Local Government Management Solutions to facilitate the General Manager's performance review process over the next 4-year period, and that was moved by Councillor Clark and seconded by Councillor Greenfield, I believe. Thank you. Councillor Kay seconded that. Thank you. So we now move to finish the council meeting, as that was the last item on our agenda. So there being no further business, I declare the meeting closed.
Madam Mayor, before we close, shouldn't we, for the record, note that that motion was passed unanimously?
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. That was resolved unanimously. So there being no further business, I declare the meeting closed at 9:26 p.m. Thank you for attending.